Hello, friends, and welcome to this podcast. I'm going to talk about music. I've talked a lot about electronic music, electronica, music created primarily on synthesizers, and pop music specifically created on synthesizers, which sort of came into being in its form that I'm talking about during the 80s with what they call synth pop bands. And I'm talking about bands like, Depeche Mode and OMD and bands like that. And a lot of those bands were created because they heard Kraftwerk. They heard Kraftwerk and they thought, you know what? There's no guitars on there and there's really no drums. I bet we could make these kind of sounds for like less money than we could if we were going to go out and buy guitars and amplifiers and drums. We could probably buy some synthesizers. So they went to the pawn shops or wherever, I don't know. But they went out there and they got their synthesizers and they programmed their drum beats into a drum machine, and they could play a show with a singer and two dudes in the back with keyboards. You know who I'm talking about, with the haircuts. And they could do these really great sort of dance music, dance songs, club music, and people were dancing, and they got really popular. Some of them got so popular that the record labels, those guys standing in the back of the club who look like they don't belong, standing back there going, there's a lot of people in here. If we could get all of their money. So they signed bands like this. The record labels signed Depeche Mode and OMD, and they put them in recording studios. And there were bands around that time that were inspired by the whole punk rock thing. Even the electronic bands were inspired by punk rock. But I think, like I've said before, punk rock was an expression of anger, angst, energy, aggression, all those things. Some of the punk rock, some of it, like the Buzzcocks, was about love and being lonely and losing your loved one and whatever, and those kind of things. But a lot of the punk rock came out of a kind of an anger about the situation that people were in at that time in history in those areas geographically. And there were bands that started out with guitars and bass who kind of eventually let those go a little bit and went more towards the clean, sort of sterile sound of electronics. And I think they wanted that. It's not like they couldn't afford the other stuff and therefore had to settle for synthesizers, like cheap keyboards or whatever. Couldn't afford a drum set, so they had to get a little drum machine box and program it. I think not. I think some bands did it because they liked that sound. They were inspired by Kraftwerk and those meticulous sort of robotic rhythms. And I think a lot of that sequenced rhythmic perfection that came out of those machines was an expression of how they felt about themselves. They felt like and this is just me speculating, I think a lot of kids in those days felt like they were just a number. I'm not a person. I'm a statistic. I'm a thing. I'm not. Nobody's ever going to give me a job. I'm not this. I'm not that. And you look around you at the factories, these places where people grew up and lived, that were around factories and things, and they just go in and they do their job and they do the same thing over and over. And I think bands like Kraftwerk were expressing the forward momentum of technology with things like Autobahn, where it was about cars and motors and electricity and the movement, radiation and radioactivity and all these things, the technology, the movement, the advancing, the onslaught of the robots, the rise of the robots, And there were some bands, some synth pop bands that got that, and they were trying to express that. One of the best, I think, is this guy, Gary Numan. He is he's out there like right now doing shows. I think maybe he just finished a tour, super beloved. And so many people credit him with being an influence, from Nine Inch Nails to just about everyone else. And I think the reason for that is he had a persona. I mean, you see him there. He looks like a robot, or he looks like a super marionette from Captain Scarlet or something. So cool and so dehumanized. The music, I think he wanted to take the organic out of the music, take the human out of the music, and he wanted to make music that sounded like it was created by artificial beings, by androids. Replicas, this is called Replicas by Gary Numan and the Tubeway Army. And for you Americans, if you don't know, the Tubeway is the subway, so it's like this army in the subway. And this album is pretty incredible. It's got me, I Disconnect from You, and Our Friends, Electric, and Replicas, Praying to the Aliens, Down in the Park. I Nearly Married a Human. Great science fiction, Philip K. Dick's stories, ideas. His vision was pretty complete. He didn't. I mean, if you went and saw this guy in concert, I think he did not sweat. He appeared to be a humanoid robot, and of course, he had that song "Cars." If you look for a movie called Erg, Music War, it's kind of hard to find, but I think maybe it's on YouTube out there. His section in that film, it's a concert film with a whole bunch of different artists playing in it, and Gary Numan is in there, and he does the song Cars. And while he sings the song, he is literally riding around on the stage in a little futuristic car. And it's so cool. It's just so detached. I love that he was never one of those, rock stars who was saying, "Hey, how's everybody feeling tonight? How are you doing? I hear Pittsburgh really knows how to rock and roll. Yay!" He wasn't that guy. He stayed detached. The entire concert, he was an android, and the songs sounded like they were written by androids. But with that said, I must also add that they are great songs. They're very fun pop songs as well. Very easy to listen to, very fun to listen to, very upbeat. It's got a great beat and you can dance to it. I think that's what they used to say. But it's a great album. It's one of his early ones, of course. There's some later ones that I think are really incredible too that didn't get the attention perhaps that his earlier ones did. There's an album called Dance by Gary Numan that I think is pretty great. The cover is a little bit maybe off-putting. It's a little silly. I think he's wearing a blue fedora or something. But don't let the cover, scare you away. It's very cool, very sort of minimalist, and still kind of detached in that cool electronica sort of way. I really like his music. I like his songwriting. I like the science fiction aspect of it. I even like the detachment of it. The fact that he's not a person. He is a character, and I think he's cultivated that very nicely. And he's still out there, doing concerts. I think now he's sort of like a scary, black leather and duct tape kind of a punk rocker kind of guy, like really up on the edge of the stage. But I have a feeling he's still got that sense of, I am a character. I am not a rock star. I'm not gonna go smiling at the edge of the stage and say, "The spirit of rock and roll, New Jersey, do you feel it?" No, he's not that guy. He's Gary Numan. And I approve of that record. And thank you very much for listening. And I will talk to you again real soon.